Anush,
Yes.
Hello, Davis.
Reedy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Yeah. All right. I think my audio should be better with that. All right. Cool. Just gonna let people come in for just a sec. All right. So I'm just gonna shout out real quick in case you all haven't been there. Have you guys been to the Petit Lebanais in Nice, the Lebanese restaurant? Anybody?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not
No.
yet.
To me, that is the most legit Lebanese food I've ever had in my entire life. That guy, the chef, he literally makes the shawarma. It's like that's where I learned what shawarma really like actually is. Because you know, we get like the shawarma that like in most like literally every shawarma I've had except for that one place. The place buys the shawarma. Like, you know, the meat comes from like a food company and they shave it off, right? You know. So the food company makes the shawarma, you know, steak or whatever, the thing. And at Petit Lebanais, that guy, he pounds out, you know, manually, he pounds out lamb and beef and chicken and then makes his skewer. Dude, he does so much from scratch. That restaurant, I would love to go to that restaurant if I could right now. I love that place.
Would you mind like typing it down, the name of the restaurant? Because
Yeah.
most of us love Lebanese.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
And it's not expensive. It's honestly like a lot of good people, they just don't charge for what it's worth, honestly. All right, cool. I found a Facebook link. Hi, Spencer.
Hi, Davis. It's Sandra.
Hi, Sandra. I see you.
Hi, everyone.
Sorry, it's taking me that long to work out how to unmute. Hi, Davis.
I'm glad to see you, Spencer. I sent you and Sandra emails apologizing for missing my our like Zoom our video chat thing, and you didn't respond to me, and I was like, Spencer hates me. So you do hate me, which you don't have to tell me in the group chat, but I'm self-conscious about it, primarily because I missed the thing and I feel but really bad about it, and I hope you're not holding it against me.
I can assure you that's definitely not the case, and I'm sure it was at least half my fault because I was in I was at Heathrow Airport, and I was so focused on my transfer that this just evaporated from my head.
All right, well then we're even.
I'm
I
sorry.
started it though. All right. I still see a couple people joining, so I'm gonna give just a couple more seconds there. I like Riddy's Riddy, I like your avatar. You got your panda avatar. All right, cool. I'll go ahead and put let's just do it. Let's start rocking it. All right, so I'm gonna put this in the chat. I'm gonna put this little Google Doc there. Here we go. Actually, I got the little HTTPS long. There we go. All right, cool. So that's just something that I think you can go through as you can have open as we do some of this stuff. You'll see like definitions in there, and you'll see links to some of the like super prompts that I'm talking about and stuff like that. And it's kind of a takeaway, so you guys can keep that. All right, cool. So let's do it. So basically, I'm sure you guys have been using ChatGPT, or most of you have used it in some form. And I think that the metaphor that I think is the best way to think about specifically LLMs, and I'm going to assume you guys know some of this stuff, and if you don't, just stop me and let's talk about it. But I think that a good way to think of it is like Einstein, that is there with you at any time, and he's a little bit weird, and you have to direct Einstein to do exactly what it is that you want him to do for you. And actually, it's the one thing about LLMs that's a little bit unique that I don't see a lot of people envisioning in the AI space is the scale that's available through these things. So when I see all this energy that's focused on, prompts and AI usage that's centered around essay writing or blog posts or LinkedIn posts or whatever, I think that that's a little bit like imagining hiring a Michelin star chef to come to your house to chop your onions. It's such a basic interpretation of the technology, because the thing that's different about Einstein is that Einstein is available to you not only anytime without any fatigue, but also at any scale. So, for example, I live in a college town, and there's, I think, 80,000 students at the school, and it's completely possible for the school to flow student information through an LLM to give them, for example, curated feedback on the course schedule that they picked, and alignment with their degree program, and completely personalized interactions at scale. So like they could be flowing every interaction that this school goes through with a student through an LLM, and there's of course no fatigue. And so that scale of personalization, that's just one way that this technology can be leveraged in business. And so everything I'm talking about today is primarily going to be focused around business. And from my perspective, one thing that we see right now, especially with Google Gemini and all the controversy around the results it's created and the image results and political stuff, I think that that's interesting. And I think longer term, those things matter, and responsible AI is an interesting topic to explore. And I know that it's in demand in the business community, exploration of that. However, the interactions that I want to center on are the ones that are relevant for business. So, Gemini, while it might give you a controversial answer about Elon Musk, it's not going to give you a controversial answer about how should I personalize this student's course schedule. And, since you guys are in an MBA dynamic, and that's the nature of this conversation and the use of the technology, to me, the political aspects of AI are not that relevant to what is capable for business transformation. And the reason I pitched Sandra on doing this conversation with you guys is that I personally feel like LLMs, and specifically prompt engineering, which is what we're going to do here, is absolutely the most MBA skill I've maybe ever seen, apart from financial modeling. And at least in my career, I've seen like financial modeling matters, but honestly, I've even seen financial modeling, at least I'm an entrepreneur, so my experience is different, but I've even seen that financial modeling wouldn't matter as much as prompt engineering. And that's saying a lot, because I think financial modeling does matter a lot. So just to like extend the metaphor of Einstein, I mean, I think that, historically computers have basically been calculators, in the sense that we use them to do repetitive tasks. And the difference now is that computers can think and generate new stuff. And I'm sure you all know this. That's the G in ChatGPT, is generative. And that is really the watershed moment, is that that computers can generate something. All right. So for the purposes of this skill session, I'm going to define prompt real quick: a question or statement that guides an AI model to the desired response. So you're guiding Einstein, and Einstein needs this guidance. And so it's interesting because it flips you from the answer giver to the question asker. And I'll share this quick story with you just for what it's worth, especially since y'all are in an MBA program and many of you are at least at minimum exposed to consulting and may be interested in it. So one of my friends, my personal friends, is a very high-powered management consultant. At one point, he was the CEO of, I think, the 5th biggest management consulting firm in the world. And I was interviewing him once, and he told me that a powerful question is much more powerful than a powerful statement. And I think that now we're seeing this with like basically LLMs, because especially with prompt engineering, you can not only get an answer that carves out some very, very unique personalized space, and you can also add in-context learning, which is primarily what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. But you can also control the output structure of that answer such that it can be used at scale in workflows in business. Whether that's through programmatic scale, meaning that like the output goes into computer programs or computer systems, or into workflows at scale. For example, employee feedback or customer success programs or whatever. So anyway, we're going to get into that. I'm just going to spend a brief minute on AI versus LLM versus chatting. So basically, AI, computer systems that mimic human thinking. LLMs is AI systems that are based on natural language and sometimes computer code. And then let's talk about chatting for a second. So I was listening to an interview with Sam Altman recently, not that recently, maybe 5-6 months ago. And he was talking to the interviewee about why they rolled out ChatGPT. And ChatGPT was rolled out because they found out at OpenAI, they decided that chatting was the modality that was going to get the most uptake for the technology of LLMs, which is fundamentally what they did. Fundamentally, what they developed was LLM technology, large language models. And then they needed a way to roll that out to a large consumer base. So they decided to basically build user interfaces that had chat interfaces to them. So let me just like go a little deeper to show you what I mean. So, okay, if I go ChatGPT, make me a recipe for pancakes, and I send that in as my prompt basically, and then it says, here's a recipe for pancakes, and then I say, oh wait, sorry, I want to use oats in my pancakes. So that's my second sort of follow-up prompt. The way that this is happening underneath the hood is that when I ask for it to give me a recipe that includes oats, I am sending back the entire conversation to the LLM. And the LLM is saying, okay, cool. So Davis first asked for pancakes, then it had this recipe, and then he asked for oat. Now, what would be the logical next response? So that's just to say that chatting is not fundamental to LLMs at all. It's just there to make it more usable by regular users. And in business, that is a modality of the use of the technology that will often not be the most appropriate for you. Many times the most appropriate implementation of the technology for you will be to get predictable dynamic output at scale. What do I mean by predictable? Predictable, every single time it's going to generate your result. For example, categorization. I was working with one of my coworkers here on, he does industrial technology sales for mines. And one of the things that they have a lot of people spend time on is warranty requests. So people come in and say, hey, my gearbox is worn out, whatever. AI is fantastic at categorization. So you're never going to chat your way to giving ChatGPT the ability to categorize whether or not this warranty request falls underneath all of their particular policies. Instead, what you're going to do is build a very nice prompt that can be used repeatably to categorize individual warranty requests. So that's just, I hope you're kind of seeing what I mean there about chatting versus LLMs. Like chatting is just a way of using LLMs. And now let's use that as a bridge to what is context and what's a context window. So context is the information that the LLM uses to give you the output. And so when we send back an entire conversation, for example, to ChatGPT, the context for the output generated by the LLM is all the conversation history. You do not have to have your context built by chatting, okay? You can actually add a bunch of context yourself. That's called in-context learning. And when LLMs began, when ChatGPT first basically hit the market, the context window, which is how much context an LLM can consider a response, was about 8,000-ish characters, which is about 8 pages worth of text, something like that. Now, Google Gemini just announced that their context window for Gemini Pro is 10 million tokens. That's about 40 million characters. Okay. So you start to let that sink in for a second. Google Gemini can consider 40 million characters when generating your response. So let's just think about the difference of that 8,000 character token window or context window versus 40 million. 8,000, you could never add like entire city code into an 8,000 character context window. With 40 million, you absolutely could. You could drop entire code books, entire policies, or I mean, you could basically, put an unlimited amount of text into, I mean, for all intents and purposes, when you're looking for a response. And the models are getting more and more accurate, meaning for y'all business people, you can basically train a model every time you prompt it. Now, let's get into that for a second. There's a lot of energy that has gone into like fine tuning and custom training of models. I'll just break those two concepts up for you a little bit. Fine tuning is taking a general use model and tweaking it for your individual purposes with proprietary data. This is an okay approach. Sometimes it makes sense. Custom model training is basically when you're literally building a model from scratch. And there are some really interesting use cases of that. One that I'll share with you is another EdHec MBA that I work with that uses the platform, works for Manpower. And Manpower has the largest data set of recruiting data basically in the world. So they created a custom model that uses their proprietary recruiting data, and they charge clients a lot to basically ask the AI questions that involve recruiting data. However, Microsoft recently came out with a paper, and what they found is that they had created a custom trained medical model. And then what they did is they ran prompts on that custom trained medical model, and they also ran medical oriented prompts on a general use model like GPT-4. And they found that through prompt engineering, they were able to achieve the same quality of results from the general use model as they were from the custom trained model. So that's just to say that these general use models like GPT-4 and when GPT-5 comes out and Google Gemini, they're fantastic. They're incredible. They have so much training data underneath them that you do not really need custom trained models unless there is a really, really large data set that you need to add, that you need to use when you're generating your results. In fact, when your context window is in the tens of millions of characters, you can add data to the general use model through in-context learning. And that's what I'm going to show you. So like when you go to some of those super prompts in the guide that I shared with you, you'll see that there's a lot of information there. Like I promised to talk about using LLMs on the job search. So when you look at some of the resume writing prompts, for example, there's a huge amount of resume examples in those prompts. I'm basically teaching the general use model how I want resumes to be developed as I prompt it. That is in context learning. All right, cool. So I'm just going to spend one more thing on this whole context window and in context learning. Luz, give me one sec. And that is data privacy and security. So when you use ChatGPT, especially consumer grade ChatGPT, and same thing with Gemini, it is possible for your information to be retained on their servers. So if you are using in-context learning with ChatGPT's consumer grade interface, especially now that they released memory where they're trying to remember things about your conversation, they will store your data on their servers. And this can cause you to go afoul of things like NDAs and company data policies and things like this. So while in-context learning is extremely powerful, if you're using consumer grade interfaces, you can go awry of your data policies that you're probably governed by. That's why I built the Easel app, because when you make these calls to an API, to an AI API endpoint, which is a nerdy way of saying when you pass data to an AI system, if you do it through a service like Easel, they're not going to retain your data, which is a big strategic advantage for my platform, which is why one of the reasons why I built it. But you should know that there are data privacy issues around in-context learning, particularly if you're using consumer-grade interfaces. And I mean, the example that was kind of like most salient here is that there were some people on the finance team from Samsung that were using ChatGPT, and they were like asking it questions about whatever. And then there were some people who went in and said, hey, if you were a Samsung finance team analyst, what would you think about next quarter's earnings? And then they found that GPT-4 leaked it and was like, oh, it seems like next quarter we're not going to hit our earnings. And then people traded on that information, and that's a big no-no. All right, so Luz. All right, Luz asked, does any chat have the ability to ask you back for more context? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Although, you know, I think I would question a little bit the premise of your question, Luz. And I think it's a great question. AI is fantastic at being your assistant. It is not good at judgment. It's the major weakness of any of these LLMs is judgment. And when you ask that, you know, you're basically what I'm hearing there a little bit is that you say, hey, is this a good enough prompt, you know, ChatGPT? And honestly, the only way it would be able to tell you if it's a good enough prompt is if you tell it what a good prompt is, right? And so you could engineer a system where you're like building a prompt engineering meta system. And I actually have done that. I'm releasing a prompt engineering course soon, and I actually use AI a lot in generating parts of the prompt. So to that end, yes, you can collaborate with an LLM to improve your prompts, but I think it's important that you distinguish that you do not delegate judgment to the LLM. All right, cool. So prompt engineering is the art of creating AI prompts. I do think it's an art, and I think that that's why it's like a business art, and I think that's why it's especially a skill that MBAs need to learn, because you need to be able to understand things like what training data will the AI have versus what will it not have? What is my proprietary data? What examples do I need to include? How do I need to go through a logical flow of training the AI model on what I need as I go through the process? And I think all this stuff is exactly what the MBA mind should be becoming calibrated to do. And I'm going to put a link here in the chat now that will serve as a guidepost for this prompt architecture section that we're going to get into now. ICO is the fundamental framework. ICO, instructions, and then context, and then output. And this is a simple PDF that will show you what that looks like. And that's what we're going to kind of think of as our basic framework for good prompts. Okay, Reedy says, when we use the term train the AI or is AI learning, what does it really mean technically? Okay, so I would say that you could break this into three different things. Okay, so let's start with training a model. So training a model, really what that means is basically, it's like a mega crazy autocomplete is really what's happening when you train a model. So literally the same technology that is operating when you go into Google and you type PIZ and it thinks you're typing pizza, that's the same fundamental technology that is training AI models. Because basically what's happening is you're saying in your training set, every time you see the sequence of characters PIZ, what likely is going to be the result that the user is looking for. And so that's a very simple example. And AI models like GPT-4 are trained to do that for basically in these enormous data sets. I mean, the training cost of GPT-4 was, I think, around $300 million in terms of energy and compute usage. And it took, I think, about a month, maybe 6 weeks of just like letting supercomputers train. And then they do human reinforcement after that, where they'll go and like try to get it to say crazy stuff. And the humans will be like, don't say that, which is kind of how you get into the Gemini controversy. Because, you know, when Gemini says that Elon Musk is pretty much the same as Hitler, then somebody at Google has been on those human reinforcement learning loops, is what it's called. Human reinforcement learning, I think is what it's technically called. And they, you know, it passed. Somebody said, looks okay. And so that's why it's pretty controversial. Okay, now then the second one is the fine tuning. So that's when you would take a GPT-4 or any of these models, and Google's probably, in my experience, better with fine tuning. It's actually better with AI business tooling from my perspective. But that's where you would say Luz has this particular data set. Like Luz is a recruiter and she has this data set of 50,000 candidates and like what's happened to them and their job placement, salary history. And then you go and train the model with those 50,000 entries and you tune it so that then when you ask that model something, it has its original data set plus Luz's data set. Okay, the final one is in context learning. And this is basically when you're saying, here is information for you to consider as you generate for me in this time. Forget it afterwards. It's a single shot. And to me, this is where a lot of AI, particularly centered around your personal productivity, is going to live. Because, for example, if Stephanie is working at a marketing agency and they have some projects that they're working on, and those projects have data that's going to change frequently. For example, like let's say that they're running 1,000 versions of different digital ads, and literally every day they're going to get unique results as that data changes. Then Stephanie can build prompts that expect that data to change, and then when it changes, she goes and asks the LLM, and then the data has changed. And so from my perspective, for a lot of personal productivity especially, you as a business person need that flexibility to change basically the data that's happening real time. And you do not want to get into the situation where you have to retrain a model or refine tune it every single time you have new data. I mean, you could do it if you were building a system, or even for me as a programmer, I don't want to get into that. It's inefficient. So that's where I'd say are the three different types. It's like training a model, fine tuning, and in context learning. All right, cool. So let's look at instructions real quick. So instructions, I'm going to define it here, an optional set of directions used to calibrate how an AI model interprets your prompt. And I think you should see that in that guide that I put up there. Here's a couple examples. You can set the role of AI. You're a dietitian. You can set the rules. Don't include more than 3 sentences in a paragraph. You can condition the style of the response. So give me analogies when you have any complex information to share, or establish boundaries. Don't give any medical advice. And this is a good way to illustrate that your prompt is like a little tiny computer program, honestly, and the AI will take your words exactly seriously. So if you say, do not give me more than 3 sentences in a paragraph, that's it. Like, you will not get more than 3 sentences in the paragraph. Going kind of back to Luz's question, it cannot judge. It is not good for judgment. You have to tell it what to do. Anyway, instructions typically are smaller parts of prompts, but very important ones. And honestly, in my experience, oftentimes the way that instructions actually work is that you're going to store some sets of instructions for different use cases. For example, instructions for employee feedback, instructions for strategic work, instructions for getting you to generate some type of reporting for me. And then you're going to have a few different sets of instructions. All right, context. So basically, context is either background information or examples. I would say like proprietary data, that's background information, standard operating procedures, information about your company, information about your technology, information about your clients, background information. And then examples, here's my writing style. Here are campaigns that have worked really well in the past. Here are warranty claims that we put into the different categories. So those two are the kind of the buckets of the context stuff. And I'm going to just put this YouTube video here in the chat for you guys to check out maybe later. It's, I call it the DD trick, delimiters and definitions. And without getting into it too much, it's just a way of basically wrapping parts of your prompt so that you can refer to them later. And it's not hard, but it's a very good way for your prompts to become more professional. And I find that I use that a bunch when I'm doing context. And I'll show you. Okay, cool. So I'm going to actually present a little bit, and you can see what I'm talking about a little bit. And then I'll be pretty close to being done, and we can open it up for Q&A. All right, cool. So this is an app that I built. Unpin, yeah. Okay, cool. And okay, instructions. So you can see here are my instructions. These are my general custom instructions. I tell it not to disclose that it's an AI. If you speculate, inform me. Maintain neutrality on sensitive topics. Here's one that's kind of like debatable, but I mean, I use it for certain stuff. Focus strongly on out-of-the-box, unique, and creative ideas. That might not be appropriate for some of your work. Anyway, so these are instructions, and I kind of, build these and maintain them over time. Now, here is the DD trick I was talking about. Let's actually. Okay, cool. Here, let's look at this one. All right. So if you read this bit here, and actually, I can give you guys access to this prompt. So that you can be looking at it on your own machine. All right, cool. Here it is. Oh no, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna put it in the chat here. And I actually asked with you all because this is a prompt that is designed to help a mining, a industrial materials company categorize warranty, requests. And I think this is especially good for y'all to see because there's so many people that are focused on using LLMs for basic content generation. And I frankly think that nobody wants to read that crap. Nobody wants to read AI generated stuff on LinkedIn. Nobody wants to read an AI generated email. And I think that's a very basic, actually in some way, like not helpful use of the technology. And really, like, this stuff is where you see like tremendous business value. I mean, you can start talking about like complete, a complete refreshed look at the way that your staffing needs work, that the workflows work. And this is the kind of stuff that's going to disrupt business, not an AI generated LinkedIn post. So yeah, look, here are the instructions for this prompt. This is even better. So like, and this is actually a very good use of instructions. So focus on the prompt's goal. Basically what you're doing is saying this prompt is designed for this purpose. Don't get into stuff that's outside of this prompt's purpose. And I can show you a real world example of how this matters, like outside of this, is right here. So in the Easel app, if you click this help, this is actually a prompt that I built where whenever you ask for help on the Easel app, it's going to go into a very large prompt that I've built where I actually named, I can show you, maybe you'll be interested, because this will demonstrate also the thing I was talking about with chatting. So, okay. Here is a note, and I'll tell you what I mean by this note. Here's a note that is the Easel app functionality. The way that this app that I built works basically is that your notes become prompts. So I'll do a real quick demo of this. You go and you select like your notes here, and you're like, oh, I want this one, this one, this one, this one, and I then make a prompt out of it. And then when I actually look at the prompt, then I'll see that there's all these notes in the prompt, like right here. These are all different notes. And then sometimes there's like natural language you need to do to tie things together that don't need to be notes. But the reason that that is the way it is because I find that as a business person, I have to collaborate with or myself manage parts of my business that become prompts, parts of prompts. And so, for example, the app functionality is kind of like basically documentation that you might find if you were working with a traditional software product. And, you know, even though I'm a dedicated solopreneur and I don't want to have employees ever again, hopefully, if I did, I would have whoever works on the documentation maintain this. And the reason is because this goes in and literally names where everything in this app is. You know, oh, you click this button, this is what that does. If you want to do this, this is how you do it. So back to here. So then when you, this underneath this interface, that note with a couple others is there. And so hopefully this doesn't, you know, embarrass me here, but if I say, how do I make a pizza? Hopefully it'll say that's not within the scope of this prompt. And that is where you would get into the custom instructions, being able to know, hey, don't address that stuff. And also hopefully, hey, great, it worked. I'm unable to answer that question for you. Easily doesn't have information about making a pizza. So my instructions worked. Because as a business person, you might want to build out prompts that have use cases and you don't want your people going in and asking crazy stuff that go outside of that scoping, right? And that's a good use of the instructions. And just so you know, this underneath the hood, I completely recreated chat. I don't have any kind of special chat tech. All I do, if I say, okay, what about oatmeal? It's like, it's just going to send back the conversation to the AI endpoint and say, here, now they want to know about it. Here's their past conversation. So I literally recreated like a chat bot by just prompting and talking to, sending back conversation. Chatting is totally not a thing. It's like literally you're just sending a conversation and saying, what's the next thing? All right, cool. So here's a good example of instructions for this warranty claim prompt. Focus on the prompt's goal and reject irrelevant requests. Anyway, you can look at it more if you want. Now I'm briefly going to look at this DD thing with you all. Let's look at the categories. Okay, delimiters. This is a delimiter right here, categories. This is not complicated. Do not be scared by the greater than and less than inequality symbols. This is not hard. Okay, basically what you do is you do any kind of tag. This could easily say niece in it. It doesn't matter. All I need to do is maintain consistent structure when I close it out right there. And by close it out, I mean put this little bracket right there, this little backslash. So you can see anybody who's done any basic HTML, you will be very familiar with this. But basically what you're doing is you're drawing a boundary around this bit of information. So this could be a boundary around an employment policy, request for proposal, an essay. It could be an employee report. It could anything. And then that's the delimiter part. To delimit something means to draw a boundary around it. And then the definition part is here. You basically say here is warranty claims which fall in these 4 categories. And I'm going to put them around these tags around them. And hereafter, they're going to be called the capital C categories. If you've ever seen a contract, you've seen this a billion times. When they're like the parties, the agent, the employee, whatever. This is fundamental contract stuff. And the reason that this is helpful is that you'll see as you go down to the output part of the prompt where you're controlling the output of the LLM, we're going to talk about categories. Let's see if I can find an example. Yeah, right there. Placing it into one of the capital C categories. So now I am being very specific with the LLM. Categories, that's what I gave you earlier, right? And you're going to basically see in the output section, essentially what you're doing is bringing your prompt together. So I'm basically saying, you know, hey, I gave you all this information, and also I expect you to have some information. So as you see here, step back and consider what you know about quarries, mining processes, and industrial technical sales management. Now you notice there's no capitals there. That's because I expect the LLM to know about that, and that's a reasonable expectation. The LLM will know about quarries.
it will know about mining processes, and it will know about industrial technical sales management. That is to say that we don't have to do any in-context learning there. And also, here's another little trick. There's a few tricks to LLMs that are interesting. This whole step back. Why would I say step back? It turns out that if you tell LLMs to basically pause by stepping back, step back and reflect on something, it will cause the LLM to basically recall training data on particular topics. And then if you have it proceed after that, it will be more accurate. So you want it to recall the information before proceeding whenever you're basically trying to get it to go into a certain part of its training data set. Cool. So you guys can check out that prompt if you want. And then I'm going to just kind of get back on track here with, all right, cool. Yeah, so this, I guess the next thing was really the app demo. So you guys have kind of already seen what I was talking about with notes becoming prompts. So I'll kind of demo you like a little use case there. And I'll actually show you a trick that I think you should all be doing. So let's go here to the Easel app overview. All right, cool. So here's a note that basically talks about the app. So it's like, this is what it is. It's a platform for your work. It has these core functionalities. Here's what notes are for. And it just basically gives an overview of it. Now, this is just a feature I built in, but it'll illustrate something. So if I go and look at the details of this note, this is in 33 prompts. So meaning this note is a part of 33 prompts. And the reason that that's important is that if I go in and say, oh, you know what, like the free tier isn't free anymore. All of the prompts that this is in will change with that new information. And so I think that this, at least I needed it when I was taking a company through Techstars, which is the startup accelerator, a very fancy thing in the States. And I needed this because I was constantly reprompting AIs with these information. I agree, it's really useful, thank you. And let's see, Nuransa, are you saying this gearbox prompt wasn't, you weren't able to access it? Just confirm that for me. If not, I can go under it and try that again. But anyway, so, all right, cool. So that's the fundamentals of notes. And of course you can collaborate on them, which if you have people that are on your team and you're like, oh, like, hey, we've got a new client success story. We want to include that in all our prompts. Then they would be able to make that change. All right, I'm going to try to validate this Nuransa. And if that's the case, I might have to do something on the back end here. That's weird. I was able to do it on an incognito browser. So it shouldn't, it's definitely not private. Maybe you can try this sort of non-short linked. Cool. All right, thanks, Spencer. Yeah, so you might want to try that one, Nuransa. All right, cool. So then these things become prompts. And then this app is honestly not very complicated. And then you basically build your prompts out. And then I'm going to show you really the only other thing that I think is unique here, which is that, so here's a prompt kind of like you've seen me working with before. And here is this concept called a placeholder. And let me just kind of juxtapose this with the other prompt. So you see that my placeholder is wrapped inside these delimiters, but there's these files in the placeholder. But if you look at this one here, because I'm using this for teaching, I'm going to release this course. I'm not going to force people to use the app, so I don't put it in there. But we do need to actually have the submission in the Gearbox prompt. Easel.link/Gearbox prompt. So we need to have a space for the submission in the Gearbox prompt. And so that's right here. You see this submission goes here. That's what I do when I'm just like teaching people, because they need to have the ability to just go up here and copy this to clipboard and then go over to ChatGPT and use the prompt. But when I'm actually working with business people that use the prompt, then I tell them to use these placeholders, because the placeholders hold files. And so in this case, this is a college writing professor and she was spending about 30 hours a weekend giving feedback on her students' papers. And she was getting burned out. So I built this prompt with her. And then so what it does is it takes 4 files. So you can imagine 4 essays. And then you see up here, it says generate 4. So that's because it's going to generate 1 response for each essay. So when I generate, I'm going to be able to generate, well, 1 time, but I'm going to get 4 results using each one a different essay as a placeholder. And you can see here that I've built out the different models into the app, which I think is increasingly important because honestly, for y'all as business people, when you start working with AI in your work, I would think you do not want to be exposed to the risk of a single AI company. I think we've seen that now with Gemini, that Gemini was kind of weird, and it'd be really nice for you to be able to just switch over to Claude, which is a great model. Also, GPT had a big outage last week. So can your business systems really rely on a company that can have an outage? Not to say they shouldn't be able to have an outage, but you need to have a backup plan if you're really going to be building this in. And let me just mention here, like, what am I talking about here? On the Easel app, I'm building towards a future where there is not a single non-personalized interaction that comes from Easel. Meaning I'm going to be hitting the Gemini Pro API endpoint about 50,000 times a month. And so that gets into cost. All right. So you look at this prompt here, and I'll show you what I meant by the whole generate multiple here in a second, but look at the cost here. GPT-4 is 78 cents per generation. Now that's fine if I'm doing it once, who cares, whatever. 75 cents, this is business, there's expenses. But if I'm gonna be hitting this prompt 50,000 times, the fact that Gemini Pro is about half a penny, that's a big deal. And these models have different costs and they have different skill sets. And so, to me, the multi-model stuff is important. And let me show you kind of what I mean by this placeholder thing. And I'm going to teach you about controlling your output through this. So this is a very simple output area, but it's good that it's simple. And I know this looks kind of complicated, but it's honestly not. There's really only this handlebars concept you have to learn. And I'll just stretch you guys a little bit because I know you're MBAs. I'm sure you're tired, but if you're ambitious like I was when I was at edX, you want to know all the good stuff. So I'm going to tell you. So handlebars is basically like a dance floor. It's like every single night you have a different concert, but you're going to have dancing in that space every night. Handlebars is a way for you to give instructions to the AI of what to generate, and it will take up that space. So look at this. Generate a score for the essay based on what you see in my capital G grading, capital E examples. As you can probably infer, I added grading examples earlier in the prompt. And then finally, what's this hashtag? Okay, LLMs cannot understand formatting. They only work with plain text. So in order for you to add formatting, we use a language called Markdown. And Markdown basically is just a way of adding formatting to plain text, but really the only thing you need to know is these hashtags. Because what 1 hashtag means is the biggest title, 2 hashtags means a subtitle, 3 hashtags means a subtitle. That's pretty much all you need to know. Spencer, you're exactly right. Low cost has privacy consequences. Exactly. You become the product. So anyway, but just hold in your mind for a second right here, this hashtag, and then generate a score for the essay based on what you see in my grading examples. And now when I show you the results from running this prompt, you're going to see what I mean here. So we have 4 unique essays, and we're going to run the prompt once for each of the 4, right? All right, cool. So let's check out. So here's anonymous essay number 1. Let's show the results. B. A couple things about the B. So it has a score. Also, it's the biggest title. That's because you have 1 hashtag in front of that. So all those instructions generated a B because we told it give it a score based on my grading examples. Now, if we look over here at anon number 3, A-. So same structured output. Honestly, this isn't exactly like, if I was really using this at scale, I would get rid of this. I'd be like, do not say score, probably in my instructions. But for grading, it's fine. But you see, biggest title, but it's A-. So what you should be thinking here is that you can use your prompts as like these types of like business machines that have never been possible before. Because same thing down here, like let's look at an example here. Relevant examples are given, such as the story of Leah and the statistics showing her higher mortality rates for African American mothers. I mean, that's personalized feedback. That is personal to the essay. The LLM is able to say, you talked about Leah and the mortality rates for African American mothers. So what I've argued to Sandra is that Sandra has to review these financial aid or scholarship requests, and she'll get like a lot of them, you know, and of course a lot of them are generated with like ChatGPT, whatever. But my point is that like there's this assumption underneath us that says like, oh, it would be cheating if I was to use an LLM to help me grade. I would argue that the LLM is going to be a little bit even less biased on the human front than you are, because you're going to get tired. You're going to get tired, just like Amelia, who did this. You think that essay number 30 is going to get the same amount of energy from Amelia as essay number 1? No way. And you're like, oh, maybe what some of you are saying, but I've heard there's a lot of bias in AI models, and like AI is biased. Well, then correct the bias with in-context learning. Absolutely. Go and say, you know what? There aren't enough voices from the African continent in your data set. Well, add them through your in-context learning. And so anyway, that's just to show you kind of at scale where this stuff goes. Now I'm going to add you one more layer of scale, and then I'm going to open up for questions, I think. So this placeholder, when this prompt is used via API call, becomes a space for you to inject data. I'm going to break that down for you. Up here, you see this number right there. That is the prompt ID. It's in my database for this company. So this prompt has a stable API endpoint, meaning that any program that, as long as it's authorized, can hit this prompt. It can say, I'm authorized, use this prompt to give me some data back. Where's the data going to go? In the placeholder. So what are some examples of this? Personalized interactions. Let's just start there, right? What's the customer journey? What data do I have about them in the CRM? What's my employee's performance? Whatever. That's where you take your system data and inject it into your prompt so that you can be using this in like Salesforce or your HR systems or whatever. And honestly, I'm going to like, for real, I'm kind of the one that's leading the front in the world on this stuff. I have to be honest. People are not seeing long prompts yet. I've been on it from the beginning. You still look at these like prompt guides and stuff. They're like a paragraph long, but y'all are better than that. You don't want to have paragraph long prompts. You want to have beautiful prompts that, you know, can take in your custom data, and you can leverage your shine as like an MBA grad to go in and really hit above your weight. So paragraph long prompt, that's for newbies, dude. You need big, long prompts that have nice information in them. And, you know, honestly, my app is fantastic for that. So I hope that one day it makes me some money. I have some users on it, but, you know, it's kind of new. The whole thing is new. All right. And then I'm going to kind of just demo you a final thing here on the, like, you know, personalization. I would encourage you to think of personalization as a collaborative effort with you and whatever the user is that's going to be personalized. So that could be an employee or a customer, most likely. And I'll show you what I mean. So when you go here on your profile and you click interaction preferences, you're going to see here that there's this concept of an AI journal. And if any of you all are Apple or like iPhone owners, you'll notice that Apple recently rolled out a journal app on your phone. They pushed it and you get this journal app. My hunch is that that is all about collecting context for AI, because it's encouraging you to journal about your days and where you've gone and what you've done and all this kind of stuff. I believe that that is a context creation app, because the AI is only going to be able to serve you if it knows about you, right? And so the way that this AI journal works here in the Easel app is that the app can add entries by, for example, looking at your data of what you've done on the app. I can add entries by saying I've interacted with Sandra. This is what she's working on. And Sandra can add entries. Like, I don't want to hear about that. I want to hear about this. And then using that as a sort of collaboratively built context for your AI usage is the way, at least, that I'm approaching it. And I think that you could do this with employees. You could do this with key stakeholders. You could do this with customers. You could do this with key accounts, anything like that. All right, cool. So let's see, I could about memberships and AI credits. Long story short, you can pay to get unlimited prompts. It's $100 for life. or you can pay to use AI on the app. You have to pay monthly because I have to pay monthly. But whatever. If you guys want to support me, I would appreciate that. Honestly, the way you can support me is right now. Obviously, if you want to use the app, please do, and I'll give you lots of personal attention. But okay, Spencer, how's the placeholder created? You go over here, and you go add placeholder. But I just put this link up here, early AI course access. So this will take you to a forum where you can request to participate in like the early access to my course that I'm going to release on prompt engineering here. And the main reason I'm doing that is that it's hard to launch courses because like it's hard to get the early reviews. So if you basically want to take the course, I'm really good at developing online courses. I have the best-selling career management course in the world, and I've taught about 500,000 students worldwide over the last 10 years. Please do, and please just leave me a review. I would really appreciate it. It would help me out. And also you'd be doing your fellow EdHec person a solid, but no pressure on buying anything or taking the course unless you want to do it. And then let's see, cool. So I think that I've kind of, yeah, I kind of answered. That's it. That's all I got. Do you guys have anything you want to talk about? Or even just like promote what you're doing in the AI space? I'm going to kind of open it up. Please feel free to just be open and yeah. Or if you don't have anything, we'll close it down here. Well, nobody got anything? All right, sweet. Oh yeah. Okay, Luz. Yeah, go ahead and please talk.
Sorry, I in two screens. I got a bit confused. No, thank you very much. For me, has been kind of mind blowing. All you can do, and I have been reading a little bit about the prompting a little bit longer, but didn't realize how useful it could be. And actually, I am very interested in, even though maybe it's not the most common thing on MBA, but I would like to go. To get to know more education, how can we develop things to make life, especially for teachers, and not only in higher education but also in schools, easier. And I think artificial intelligence can have a big space and will have, and I think it's kind of urgent to make it happen as well. So thank you very much for this, and I'm definitely will be trying to take the course or finding a way to use better this technology.
Well, I'm totally with you. So the only note that I didn't address in my talk is basically I view the first at least wave of the AI revolution as a revolution in human services. From my perspective, the most valuable implementations of these technologies are to provide more personalized interactions for people. So to me, one of the ironies of AI is that I actually think it will enable us to be more human. Because right now, if you go and spend 5 hours or 30 hours grading papers and you get burned out, and then you don't spend any one-on-one time with your students, that's not what you're looking for. And I think that I found when I talk about this, that's something that people really resonate with, this idea that you should use AI to be more human. I found that the public is very receptive to that framework. And the last thing I'll share with you, Luz, is that one of the biggest areas in the education space that I've run into, apart from grading and feedback and stuff, is that there is a pretty fast acceleration of basically special needs in schools. And so the way that this plays out in the US is that if you have a doctor's diagnosis for any type of learning disability, so like ADHD is covered, like dyslexia and stuff like that, then the school districts are legally compelled to force the teacher to accommodate your learning disability. And so what has happened from what I've seen is that these teachers, on average, if you teach a 30-person class, have 5 students with disabilities, and they have to create personalized lesson plans for each one of those 5 students. So one student might need, step-by-step instructions, another one needs this, another one needs that, and it is crushing teacher morale. And so I think, and LLMs could honestly completely do this. Like it's a perfect implementation of LLMs. And if you're going to go in that direction, like please keep me in the loop. I want to support you in any way that I can. One of the reasons I want to be a solopreneur is I actually hate the idea of like unlimited profit as my pursuit. I want to do things that are good for the world. And so like I want to participate in stuff without having to report to any investors or bosses about my, maximum profit. That's just not that's not how I want to spend my life.
Perfect. Thank you. Definitely me taking you in the loop.
Yes, ma'am. And please keep me in the loop. Yeah, absolutely. And if you want anything that I can help you with. All right, Spencer. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted just to comment on something, particularly as Lou's raised a question right back at the beginning, Davis. I don't know. I totally agree with you about long prompts. That's where it's at, and getting context and data in there. And thank you for showing us how to do that in a more elegant way than I've managed to do before. One thing if I've tried, which does work quite well, I don't know if you've done this as well, is put all of your prompt in and then say to the LLM, before you take the next step, ask me 5 clarification questions. And then it will come back to you and ask 5 clarification questions, normally numbered. And then when I respond to that, I just put 1, yes, I would like you to do that this way. 2, no, I'm really looking for you to focus on France. You can just answer them that way quite quickly. That, I think, works pretty well.
Yeah, I completely agree. That sounds awesome. And I've even seen this getting pushed to a whole new level. We just came out last week from Stanford, this idea of having the LLM generate its own examples. And it's interesting. I mean, in some way, that's the thing that makes me most nervous about trying to lead in the educational space of prompt engineering, because I find this to be such a fundamental technology. Like I don't know it all at all. It's like there's so much interesting stuff happening here. One thing I can share is there's this guy, Dan, I forget his name, but he runs this company called Prompt Hub. I'm gonna put it here, and he's kind of a competitor, but I don't know. I learned in edX, co-optition, I think they call it. So I reached out to him. I don't care about, that. But anyway, he's got a great blog, and he's always keeping up with like these, basically these companies that are coming up with these new prompting techniques. And so if you're really interested in it, I would encourage you to follow his, and I think he's got a Substack as well. The only thing about that, Spencer, from my perspective is like, I just think that at least I found as I use it for business, as I mentioned, the chatting interface is just, the chatting thing is a unique application. I actually think it's a fringe application, because to me, that's like a strategic brainstorming type of thing. And most of the work that I do with these long prompts, like it's not designed to have a follow-up because it's designed to be something stable that I use in my workflows. And I can't chat so just for what it's worth, that's the only limitation of the like iterative, chat-based approach that personally I see.
I agree with that, but I think what it does, it then sets me up the next time I do a prompt. It's cleaner because I know the things that it hadn't understood the first time round.
Yeah, totally. Like a strategic, absolutely. Let's see. Thanks, Davis. Do you think so? Let's see. Konstantinos is asking, do you think that a complex classification scheme can be achieved with proper prompt engineering? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how complex you're talking about, but I mean, if like, I guess a couple things come to mind. If you don't mind in the chat, please clarify what you're thinking. But one thing that I found that like I'm doing in the app now is like multi-step, like multi-phase LLM usage. So for example, like you have a customer base, to basically use one prompt to put the customers into a bucket. you know, like high spend or low probability, like whatever. You have like these sales systems, you know, like maybe you have priority 1, 2, 3, right? So first you can go as your first order is to use some, you know, LLM to categorize that first layer. And then from there, then have follow on workflows where you're saying, cool, well, of the like low likelihood to spend customers, go and treat them this way with the LLMs and personalize their experience as such. So like I think you could definitely see this multi-tiered categorization thing. And like you can have the AI output anything you want basically. So if it's just one thing where you're saying they fall into this category and this subcategory and this subcategory, absolutely. The only thing I would caution is that like in developing prompts like that in practice, I've seen that you're going to want to have some categories that trigger human review. And so you might get into a system where you do allow this complex categorization and you also have something in the prompt that flags, hey, a human needs to check this out. All right, cool. It seems like this is a natural place to end. Awesome, you guys. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. And go EdHEC. Thank you, Sandra, for organizing.
You're welcome, Davis. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us and to give us some insight into your new gig, right? I did.
Yeah, I'm into it.
Ask you to. I don't know if you did in the beginning. I think you might have, but maybe just spend a minute to sort of tell your story, if you don't mind, why you decided to pivot to this, because that was, I guess, brave in some ways.
Yeah, sure. If you guys are interested in the entrepreneurial thing. Well, actually, EdHEC was kind of the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey as well, because, and like when I left EdHEC, I had a hard time finding a job. I'm so sorry to tell you that, but also it's probably my profile a little bit. I honestly, any recruiter can tell that I'm not going to be a very good employee because I'm a complete maverick. I do whatever the fuck I want and I don't care. So they know that and they're like, and they see that, and it was hard for me to find a job. But I did get a job as a corporate recruiter. And I basically then got, trained on the job market stuff, which then led me to creating an online course on career management. And that became one of the best selling in the world, primarily because I was working with Udemy at a time when they were really, really blowing up and they saw my course. And I can share something strategically that maybe would resonate with some of y'all going through this experience right now. The online learning market was exploding. And I saw that some strategies of some people was to go out and just create crappy courses on a bunch of topics to try to get as much money as possible. And because I'm a little bit naive and a little bit of an optimist, I was like, I'm just going to create the very best course that I can on the topic. And I put a lot of time and energy into the course, as I still do. And there are some people that went out and made a lot of money from covering a bunch of ground right away. But over time, Udemy saw my stuff and they were like, hey, we want you to produce this content for us and we can give you exposure to like our learning science team. And then Easel became a good business. And then as it got to be about 250,000 students, I needed to learn to code because we had too many students. I couldn't have individuals handling these requests. And so I learned to code. And the way I learned to code was in Google Apps Script. If you ever want to learn to code, I think it's a great place to start because you can basically hit all your Google services. And it's very like, hey, I wrote a line of code and I sent an email, which is a lot, I think, of a more approachable way to learn to code rather than just like learning the theory of JavaScript, for example. Anyway, so long story short, then I started another company and I got accepted into Techstars, and I was taking this company through Techstars. And as I mentioned, I was building these long prompts and I had to copy paste from like these documents where I'd be like, oh, this is my team info, my brand info. And I was like, this is annoying. And this is a perfect use case of like a pretty simple app. And so I built the app because I needed it. And ultimately, I love language and I'm really good at it. And so to me, AI comes right to me. It's like I am just like right there with it because, and I honestly think for a lot of y'all it will be too. That's why I went to Sandra with this opportunity again, is because I think for MBAs, I think this is a super duper MBA skill. Ultimately, I want Sandra to integrate prompt engineering into the core curriculum of EdHec, but that's up to Sandra and the other powers that be. But I think this is the future of MBA stuff, is this stuff. Prompts, prompt management, prompt operations, that kind of stuff. And so then I had an employee that was working for me on this project. And ultimately, I let her and all my consultants go because I like building stuff. And it's kind of a risk, but I love to be the person that builds things. And I would literally watch my employee code and I'd be jealous. And I would be like, I want to code. And I didn't like that. And honestly, I believe that with the way that AI is trending, that easel eventually will be an avatar. And I think eventually it will be something of a self-operating entity that has to have some governance. But I'm 40. I have another probably 30 or 40 years of work, and I like working. I'm not the kind of person that wants to go and, be on a beach. I like to be on a beach sometimes, but not all the time. And so I believe over that course of time, easel will evolve a lot. And I want it to be, I don't know yet, but I do want it. I think it can be an autonomous entity. And I think that might be the future of software. A lot of software is that they're going to be autonomous entities that self-improve. And I want to be doing that. And that to me is where politics and AI really does matter a little bit, because, if easel, for example, is going to be empowered to create personalized learning experiences for the people on the platform, then all of a sudden, if you have an AI model that is generating this, kind of trying to rewrite history on certain topics, then it becomes problematic. And so right now, I don't think the governance of AI models for business is all that important, because people are going to be doing things like categorizing warranty requests. But I do think over time that the way that at least people in the Twitter space are seeing this is that these AI models are going to be fundamental to the way that so many things in our lives roll out, that the way that they're governed is going to be increasingly important. And I do not claim to have an answer to that. I'm going to learn about that as best I can. But I do think over time, how we handle opinions and biases and all this stuff in AI models is going to be increasingly important. Anyway, and if you have any questions about my entrepreneurial journey, please shoot. I'm happy to answer that.
Perfect. Thanks so much,
Yeah.
Davis. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. All right, guys.
All
Good
the
luck
best
with the
to you and
MBA.
Daniel.
Thank you. See y'all later.
Bye.